Want to speak real Korean from your first lesson? Sign up for your free lifetime account at KoreanClass101.com.
Hello there, Korean learners. This is Jeremy, and I realized I forgot to introduce myself in the last video, so I apologize. My name is Jeremy, and I teach Korean and English. And in this video, I'm going to be teaching you about how to say notice in Korean. Now, notice, what I mean by notice is when we say things like, oh, I noticed you cut your hair, which, did you notice I cut my hair? So the content of this video is a little bit more directed toward intermediate learners, people who are having Korean conversations and are making statements and telling stories and need to say something like notice. So I won't go too in depth on grammar explanations and things. So if you have questions about what the sentences that are used, please share them in the comments, and we can all help each other out. Okay? So in this video, we're going to talk about a few different ways to say that. There are many ways, and as is common with Korean, it's very unlikely that you'll ever really find a perfect one-to-one translation between English and Korean. So this one's a little complicated, and I know that when I was learning to speak Korean, this was one of the ones that really tripped me up the most. I kept wanting to say it, and I kept getting confused as to how to do that. So I'm here to help today. Now first, we're going to mention a couple things about notice, the essential meaning of notice here, so that we can refer back to that when we talk about these other ways to say it and the example sentences to come. All right, so stick with me. Now, what does it mean to notice something? I'll give you a second to think about it. What does it mean to notice something? Well, to notice something is something that we did not know comes into our head, right? It goes into our head. So we go from a state of not knowing something, not knowing about something, being unaware of something, into a state of awareness, or into a state of knowing. Knowing. That's a key word here. So the first verb that can be translated to notice is alda. Alda. That lil, you put the tip of your tongue at the point where you would make a D sound in English, like d. That spot. That's where you put the tip of your tongue. Lil is always pronounced that way. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't move. A lot of miscommunications about that. Now, alda, you may be like, dude, I know that one. It means to know, right? And that is correct. That was what the dictionary will say. However, because, like I just said, because when you notice something, you go from a state of not knowing something and move into a state of knowing it. Often in times where in English we would say notice, in Korean you can use alda to say the same thing. It is commonly, it will commonly replace that in the exact same situation. Now, in English, when we say notice, we actually usually say it in the past tense, because after the noticing happens, we are then able to say it. Right? Oh, I noticed that you cut your hair. Okay, I'm going to say it now. Hey, I noticed you cut your hair. It always happened in the past. So that's kind of the same with alda here as well. 알았어요, 알았다. So it is often used in the past tense to indicate noticed. So you see that here in these two example sentences. Now I'm going to compare these two sentences you see here. 김치 알았어요. This is 김치를 알았어요, but the 를 is often skipped in speech. So I'm showing you a sentence the way it would naturally be spoken. And 김치인지 알았어요. 김치인지 알았어요. Okay, so this 인지 part, I won't explain too much, but indicates that there's some question about that thing. It's saying the fact that it was kimchi. Whereas in the first example, you're just saying, by saying 김치 알았어요, this is not notice. This doesn't indicate notice. This just means I knew kimchi. So if someone says, oh, did you know about kimchi before you went to Korea? Koreans love to ask about that, right? And you say, 네, 김치 알았어요. 한국에 가기 전에 김치 알았어요. I knew kimchi, I knew about kimchi before I went to Korea. So this is no. This one is not notice. However, 김치인지 알았어요. This one you could translate as notice. I noticed the fact that it was kimchi. I noticed that it was kimchi. You're looking at the table and someone's is asking you like, oh, did you know this was kimchi? You just ate it. What? I thought you didn't like kimchi. What do you mean? Did you notice this was kimchi? 네, 김치인지 알았어요. 네, 김치인지 알았어요. 김치인지 알았어요. So I think this one you could translate as notice. All right. Now, alda is a very, very useful verb in Korean because it is used in a lot of compound verbs. So there's 알아보다, 알아가다, 알아내다, 알아듣다, which means to understand through listening, which is a useful one for us language learners, right? 알아듣다. And then two others here that we're going to use that actually much more closely relate to or mean notice. So the next one is aracharida. Charida. Now to make this one make sense, if we look at charida here, it means sort of to set up or to to upright something. It's used in two common expressions that I know. Actually, these are the only two expressions I know that where it's used by like this. 정신 차리다 and 밥상 차리다. So I won't explain these two expressions here because they're not related, but you can see them on the screen. Now, aracharida does mean notice, relates directly to notice. So we're going to take an example sentence here, and then we'll compare it with this other verb that is very similar to aracharida. 임신한 걸 알아차렸어요. 임신한 걸 알아차렸어요. So in Korean, the subject is often left out. So in this situation, 임신 meaning pregnant, 한 걸, we're talking about a girl. No, it's just a coincidence that 걸 sounds like girl. 임신한 걸, the fact that she was pregnant, she is not present in this sentence. 임신한 걸 알아차렸어요. So this is directly, I noticed that she was pregnant. Now, if we compare this with another verb that also means notice in Korean, 알아채다, then it gets kind of interesting. So, 알아채다, 임신한 걸 알아챘어요. Both of these you could translate to, I noticed that she was pregnant. But if we look at the essential meaning of both of them, they're a little bit different. So we just say notice in English, but 알아차리다, with 차리다 being something more like to set or to upright or to make correct, to put back together, sort of, to resurrect. That feels close but not right. In that sense, it's more of a aracharida is more of a mental thing. It's more of a like, oh, I figured out, I thought about it, and I figured she was pregnant. She was, not eating as much as normal, or she didn't drink alcohol, so I figured, I figured she was pregnant. So that's aracharida. Aracheda seems to me to be more of a feeling type thing, like I picked up on that. I picked up on the fact that she was pregnant. It's a little bit less conscious and a little more sense-oriented. You just kind of felt it. You're like, I don't know, I got a feeling that she was pregnant. I noticed that she was pregnant. So these are the two verbs here that can directly translate to notice. Now, there's a much more common way, which I'm going to share with you here, and it is actually not a word at all. It's not a verb. It's what I call a nuance tag. It's something that, there's a lot of these in Korean. If you're having Korean conversation, you may know a few of these. They get attached on to the verb at the end of the sentence, and they indicate a certain nuance. And in English, we do this with tone. Okay, so they're like tone tags, you could say. So in English, if I say, hey, come over here, or come over here, hey, come over here, right? There's a big difference in meaning there. That shift in tone in Korean, that kind of thing is spelled differently at the end of the sentence. Very interesting. So this one is 더라고요, 더라고요, or 더라고, 더라. Sometimes it's cut off like that. This one I've taught in the past as the afterthought tag. It's an afterthought. So this one does not always translate to notice. So there's no one-to-one translation for notice. Sorry if that's what you're hoping to get by watching this video. But I'm going to give you a few example sentences here to illustrate the way in which this covers notice. And I believe this is like the most common one. So the first example sentence is 걔가 슬퍼하더라고요. Now, 슬프다, you may know, is the verb for to be sad. And by adding the hada on here, it moves it into the third person. This is the third person form for something that is sort of, I guess, emotional in nature, not necessarily in action. Like you wouldn't have to do that to say that he did it, or he broke it, or he stole it, whatever. You wouldn't have to do that. But when talking about someone's emotions or desires, then you add on this hada to make it in the third person form. So 걔가 슬퍼하더라고요. Now I'm saying he in the third person, 슬퍼, right, was sad, and the 더라고요 there indicating an afterthought, therefore meaning or making it translatable to I noticed. Because when you say you noticed something, that is often an afterthought, right? Now a note about 걔 here, I often pronounce it 걔, 걔가, and a lot of people say it that way too, although that is incorrect technically. But it this indicates a third person, so it could be a man or a woman, someone else who's not here. It's like that girl, that guy. And you may know the words, the word 그, like 그가, 그는, and 그녀, like 그녀가, 그녀는. I usually don't see 그 by itself to indicate a person. So if you know these two words and you know them to mean he and she, they were actually created when Western novels started getting translated into Korean, because pronouns were so evident in the Western novels in European languages, Latin, Romance languages. They were so prevalent that without a translation for them, the books were very, very confusing. So they had to create a word to add it to that. But those words are not really used in real life, almost never. It sounds kind of weird. It sounds like someone's trying to read out of a textbook. So I noticed he was sad. In this situation, you can say this. If you saw your friend was, his face was down and he or she was looking sad, and you can say later, 걔가 슬퍼하더라고요. 걔가 슬퍼하더라고요. All right, so let's take another example here. I noticed they broke up. I noticed they broke up. 둘이 헤어졌더라고. 둘이 헤어졌더라고. 둘이 헤어졌더라고. This one's in 반말, right? Maybe I'm talking to my friend now saying this. Makes more sense. I'm talking about people breaking up. And this is the same thing. 둘이 meaning the two of them. Them, two. 둘, like two, right? 둘이, meaning both of them sometimes. 헤어지다, to break up. So 둘이 헤어졌더라고. Yeah, I noticed they broke up. Yeah, they were not holding hands. They were not looking at each other. They were avoiding each other's stares. So this afterthought tag indicates notice. You could translate it to notice, right? Another example, I noticed she cut her hair. I'm not she, but I'm a he, but still. 머리 잘랐더라고. Now, to cut hair, or for cut here, is 잘. The first syllable there is with a single J, but it often gets pronounced with a double Korean J. I like to just use the English letter names to indicate them. So it gets pronounced like 잘, 잘랐더라고, a lot. Very, very common. Okay, so that's another sentence. And then one more here, I'll leave you with this one, is I saw your mom yesterday. I saw your mom yesterday, and I noticed she lost weight. I saw your mom yesterday, and I noticed she lost weight. 어제 어머님을, I'll mention that name in a second. 어제 어머님을 뵀는데 살 빠지셨더라고. 살 빠지셨더라고. 살 빠지다, to lose weight. Now there's some honorific things in here because we're talking about your mom. I'm talking about your mom or someone else's mom. And when you talk about other people's parents, usually you put this 님 on there. So instead of saying 엄마, you say 어머님. And then instead of saying 보다, you say 뵈다. This is another honorific. And 빠지다, you put a 시 in there to indicate the honorific as well. 빠지셨더라고. Now, if you have questions about any of these things from these sentences, including these honorifics or anything else that was mentioned here, please share them in the comments, and myself or some other highly skilled Korean learner or native Korean person can help us out and fill in the gaps here. So I hope this video was helpful. I know it's hard sometimes because there isn't an easy way to say the thing that you want, but I teach English to Korean people as well, and my goodness, English is just as hard. So we're all in this together, Korean people learning English and us learning Korean as well. So I hope you help your Korean friends. I hope you continue your learning and enjoy the journey, friends. See you in the next video.